Hello again, welcome back. We're almost done going through our React Redux review journey. And so far we have our app that's kind of up and running. Mostly, we can type in a zip code there and it should load some weather data. We can't see the data yet though, right? Because we're not actually displaying it. I didn't get any errors though, so maybe things are going well. We've set up our actions. We used asynchronous actions and Redux Thunk to load data asynchronously with fetch, and we've set up our reducer. Okay, so we've got our reducer set up, and then last step was to set up the root reducer. Okay, so this is pretty good. The next step here is to handle data when it's loaded. So let's make and we need to send an action too. We haven't done that yet. So let's actually send the action first. That'll actually prove if we have any errors, right? So let's do that first, and then we'll handle displaying the data, okay? So I'm going to go to my code here, and we have the enter zip component. And this has our form right here, and it has our on submit. So to make this work, what we want to do is we want to import our action. Let me do from /actions, and I want to get the load weather action, like the lowercase load weather, right? Because this is the function, okay? And I also want to get I want to import the use dispatch hook from React Redux. So let's get that. So let's do React Redux, and then we want to get the use dispatch hook, okay? So we've got our load weather function, and we've got our action and our use dispatch hook, okay? So now inside our component here, let's say const dispatch equals use dispatch. Okay, so that gets us the dispatcher, or a reference to the dispatcher. And now in our on submit right here, I want to call the dispatcher, and I want to call it with the load weather function, and I want to pass in the zip code. So you remember that when I'm calling load weather here, I'm calling the action, right? Let me actually split this again and go get those actions there, right? So what's happening here is I'm calling this load weather function. So I've imported it, right? Because I exported it here, so I imported it up here. And then I'm going to call the dispatcher, but inside the parentheses here, I'm going to call load weather with the zip code, right? So when I call load weather, I pass the zip code in here, and then I'm going to return a function. So that's going to return a function to the dispatcher. And it's a little convoluted because the dispatcher is going to execute that function for us and pass itself back in, and then this code is going to run, right? And when it's done running, because it's asynchronous, it's going to take a little bit of time, and when it's completed, it's going to call the dispatcher and then pass an action object to it, right? And then that's going to run the code in our reducer. So let me close these guys up there, and let's give this a try. So there's our data there, and let's think of a way. How can we test this, right? So is this working? I don't know, right? So why don't we run it here and see what happens? So if I hit submit there, I don't get any errors, right? Actually, let me refresh because it's just to make sure, right? So I'll type in 90210 and hit return. I didn't get any errors. How can we know if this is working? So we really need to create a component to display the weather, but before we do that, let's give it a test. So I'm going to go into my reducer right here, and I'm going to go to the weather reducer. So if things are running correctly, I should receive an action here, right? And I can console log that action, right? So I'll just console log the action here, and and then we'll be able to see what this is in the console, right? And maybe just for fun, to make it a little bit easier to spot in the console, I'll put a bunch of stars in here, right? Just put a line of stars there, and I'll put some below here, and then we'll be sure to spot this action. So let me run that. Let me refresh this. Oh yeah, there we go. So that's kind of working. Now when Redux boots up, it actually kind of runs your reducer a couple times, and it passes this weird thing in here. I don't know what this is, but it's just kind of like checking out the reducer and initializing it, right? So let's clear all that and then type in 9021 and submit. Oh look, there we go. And it says load weather is the action type. And then I receive the temperature and the feels like and a COD of 200. Good, it's working, right? Let's try another one. What if I type in a zip code that's bad? Like I just type in 9, right? And I hit submit. Now I get an error, but it's gonna say, oh, I get an error here because, oh, we gotta fix it. Yeah, good thing we tested, right? So you can see here I got my action right there, and it says load weather, and then the payload is 400 and the message is invalid zip, so that's working. I'm getting an error here because I realized that in my action, and hopefully you guys all catch that, right? Follow along with me, right? You know, we called the dispatcher here, but then we called it again at the bottom, right? But we're not going to be able to get the temperature data because, you know, the zip code was invalid and it doesn't exist. So we need to make sure that we end or exit this function early. So if we're in here and we've got an error, like response error, right, we should put a return right here, okay? And that'll make sure that we exit early before trying to run the code down here, which will fail if there was an error, okay? So I'm gonna save that, and then we'll refresh this again, and we'll type in an invalid zip code. Let me clear this so we can see it, and then I'll hit submit. And then now you can see that I get, you know, bad server response 400, and then I get the error here, but there's no React error. So this is great. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. So now how can we display our data? So, and let's do one more thing, right? So realize that we actually did half of the work here, right? We used, in enter zip, we used use dispatch to send an action, right? So we got that working. Now we just need to use selector to pull in you know, our Redux data when it's updated. Okay, so let's make a component that can display the temperature. So I'm going to add one more component here. I'm going to say display temp.js. Okay, and so I'll save that to my app, and I'm going to import from React Redux, and I want to get the use selector hook. Okay, so this is where we're going to pull in data, right, from our selector, right? This use selector is going to be able to pull in state from the application store, right? And now let's make a function. So I'm going to make a function here called display temp, okay? And you may notice here that there's something that we're not doing in the Redux app that we did in our React app, is we're not passing a lot of props, right? So in the React app, you end up passing props around to move information from component to component, or up or down the component tree, right? Or actually down the component tree, really, because you can't pass props up. But in a Redux app, our components actually just kind of reach out to the store and pluck the data that they want. They don't rely that their parent or their ancestor is going to pass something down to them, okay? So it's kind of a different way of working, and it's actually kind of nice when you get used to it. It's pretty flexible. So here I'm going to return, and then let's just keep this component simple. I'm just going to return an H1, okay? Now, remember, sometimes our data could be null, so the temperature might not exist. So inside this component, I'm going to get the Redux data, and if it's null, or if the COD is not 200, then I don't want to try and display the temperature, okay? So let's go get our data here. I'm going to do const, let's just call it weather. Maybe let's do this. Actually, let's deconstruct it like that, right? And then let's do use selector. And use selector takes a function, and this function takes in state and then returns the pieces of state that you want, okay? So in my case, since we only have one parameter here, we can remove the parentheses. And we're only going to do this on a single line of code, so I can remove the curly brackets. So I want to return state.weather. And why do I want to return state.weather? Is because and I'll split the screen here again, right? Because our reducer right here, the combined reducers here, is storing the data on the weather key. So state.weather is the weather property that we're getting. Remember I said state is going to look like this. It's going to have a key called weather because we put weather here. So here we're going to get state, that's this entire object, right? The whole thing. And then I just want to get the weather key off it. So far we only have the weather key, but maybe we'll add some more properties later, but right now we just have the weather key, so I'm going to get that. And then over here, since it's an object, we can deconstruct it, right? So let's do that. Let's deconstruct to temp and COD. And I guess we have that feels like property too, so I'll get that. Actually, I'll just leave that off. You know, for now, we just need these two, right? Okay. And let's check. So let's say like, hey, if COD does not equal 200, I think we can use the same pattern here. Then let's return, and since there's nothing to display, we can just return null. If you want, you could return a component. So you could say like, please enter your zip code, or you know, whatever the error message was. Okay, but I'll just return null. If a component returns null, it doesn't render anything. Okay. If this was not if this was 200, right? The value here was 200. Then down here, I can display the temperature data. Okay, so we'll display our temperature data there. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. Let's try and use this component now. So let's make sure that we export it. So we'll say export default display temp, and then in the app.js, I'm going to import that component. So let's go here and do import display temp from /display temp, right? And then maybe I'll display it above where we enter our zip code. So I'll put display temp right here. And so far we don't have any data to display. Let's try and display 90210. Oh, 76 degrees. It's pretty warm in Beverly Hills. Let's check out New York. 75 degrees. It's pretty warm there too. Let's check out San Francisco, 94010. 65 degrees, so not bad, right? So that's working, and again, we did it with Redux, so anywhere in our app we could pull in the temperature data. If you recall the other app, we put the weather data in state inside a weather component, and then it meant that this display component had to be a child of that component in order to receive the weather data, right? Otherwise you'd have to lift state up if you wanted to put it somewhere else, and that could be like a hassle. It could be a lot of work, right? In Redux, you know, we can just have a component that plucks the data that it needs from the global application state, right? And it can be anywhere, right? So this component, I could move it anywhere. It could be inside here. It could be outside there. I could wrap it in another component. I don't have to worry about, you know, changing the props here, right? Or lifting state or any of that business. Okay. So anyway, thanks for watching. I hope that this was informative. My challenge to you is to display some other data. You could put the feels like, you could put the humidity in here. Also add some styles to style your components. So try those challenges now, and then I'll see you in the next video and we can continue and add a couple more options here. So as always, thanks for watching and have a great day.